Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller Podcast. How you doing today, Mike?
Fantastic. How about yourself, Mr. Chris?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there.
A lot going on.
A lot going on. You know, we haven't like had one of these. We haven't recorded in 2 weeks, I think. Our last one being worst case scenario. Before that, we hadn't recorded in a couple weeks. So, you know, since the baby, since, you know, just life in general, things have gotten a little bit crazier. But we had a great talk with our patrons last week, talking The Gray Man. It kind of like, we didn't really like go that much in depth into each one, but, you know, we kind of hit on everything in about an hour and a half. I guess we were a little ambitious doing 3 books in one meetup, but nevertheless, it was nice to see everybody.
It might have been our biggest group also. We had quite a few people.
Yeah, we had
there.
like everybody, I think, right?
I think everyone except for our wonderful patron Adam from Liverpool. Yeah, we'll have to work him in sometime.
We gotta do a weekend one, you know?
Yeah, we started off talking Mitch Rapp or Gray Man. What did we start with?
We started off talking Gray Man because Sherry hadn't read it. So she's like, and she was like double multitasking while talking to us. Yeah.
So we got the Gray Man talk out of the way, which if you want to listen to our coverage of book number 1, The Gray Man, we recorded that seems like ages ago, right before the movie came out.
Over 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2022, and that's episode July 17 on this feed. So really scroll down that feed quite a bit.
This one is episode 61, so.
Yeah, and so a lot of books in between then and now. But it does feel good. It does feel good to get back to The Gray Man. I did enjoy the first book. I had a lot of questions. I think that book was... I want to stay away from the word cheap, but it almost might just becoming part of the series now that I've read the second book, that the Gray Man is indestructible. And like, if that's going to be a trope of he can survive anything, I mean, he gets shot with a freaking arrow in this book by a kid. Yeah. And if that's the shtick they're going for, it's so bombastic, over the top, both in the plotting and in what the Gray Man's doing as the hero, as the protagonist. I kind of could just get over the buy-in and enjoy the story if that's what the series is going to establish, which I think it is.
I'll agree with you with that, but I do feel like this book was a lot more grounded.
It's more grounded.
The last book.
Yeah.
The last book, we're jumping from, you know, being handcuffed to what was it, a bench in Prague, right? And somehow survives like this giant shootout.
That scene was insane. Was that even
and
in
that's
the book,
just
though?
One,
because I remember that in the movie.
That's in the
I thought
movie.
They made that up for the movie.
No, it's partially in the book.
Kind of, you're right. They do the whole train thing a little bit long in the movie, but it is in the book too.
You know, like, but in the first book, it's like one thing after another, after another, after another. And like, this guy it's very Mission Impossible-esque, you know, Ethan Hunt. This guy's in James Bond-esque.
Yeah, it's a mashup of those two, for sure.
If you think about it, like, what do you feel, or how do you feel about this? You know, because you could just plug The Gray Man as any other series, but I feel like the one thing that Mark really tries to add is this morality piece.
The moral compass,
like,
sure.
Yeah, the moral compass aspect of it. You know, he really talks about it. He talks about it a lot. Do you like that? Like, how do you feel that as the quote unquote trope for the Gray Man series?
I think you use the word perfectly. A trope is, I want to like it. I want my characters to have that sense of right and wrong. We talk about that a lot with Mitch, right? His conscience, it's very extreme. And I think in the phone call, what I said was, sometimes it's about going into that gray area of morality, and like, you have to do things you don't know if they're right or wrong. Even though he's called the Gray Man, I think he's very black and white. It's just that both of his extremes are pure extremes to the furthest extent possible. So he's going to get his hands dirty like a Mitch. He's going to not kill innocent people like a Mitch. He's going to follow up on his promises. Like he tells the one guy in the opening scene in Dublin, he'd look out for his son. And so I do like it in the end, but it is a trope. I I think it. I don't know if it makes him unique. It's definitely clear Mark Greaney wants to show his protagonist as having this moral compass. But is that just what all of them want to do? It's like, I have a super killer, but he's a good guy at heart. It's almost too tried and too true and too old. So when I see it here going to an extreme, I'm like, this again? But I don't know what else I would want. So I think he's a good character. That's a part of his character. But it's just like the other things I said. If that's what we're establishing, he's going to be over the top, do the right thing, try to be a good guy, try to convince people like this Ellen Walsh lady that he's good at heart, even though he's a killer. He's going to kill in cold blood, as we see him do in the middle of the desert there. But he also is going to try to prove to her, like, I'm more than the things I'm hired to do. So, yeah, if that's what we're going to do, that's what we're going to do. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I feel like that's how Mark Greaney wants to establish him as being something different.
But is it?
I just feel like he's beating us over the head with it.
Yeah.
You know, did you get that feeling?
No, for sure. It comes up
and
a lot.
Like, just it coming up a lot. Instead of allowing it to just
happen,
happen, build the character around
he's so dark
that
at
idea.
The same time. That's why it works, because he's also so dark and gruesome at the same exact time.
Yeah, maybe that's like what he's going for. I'm just trying to, as we establish this series, if it's something that, if it's something that we want to, keep on going down this road of going into the Gray Man, because I actually really enjoyed this book.
Me too.
I think I enjoyed this book way more than I did the first book.
I agree.
And, I'm trying to understand what is going to distinguish the Gray Man from other things. But like you said, I think, the first book set the tone that it's going to be outrageous. This guy is quote unquote indestructible. And he definitely has some of those moments here, but I think it was way more grounded this second time around.
Sure.
There was a little bit less, unbelievable. The buy-in score, as we would say, was a little bit higher in this sense.
Yeah. The Goon Squad coming after him. I know they're called the Goon Squad, but the Goon Squad coming after him in book one, all of these killers from all these teams around the world, the biggest bounty you've ever seen. Like, that's just shits and giggles. Like, that's just for fun and over the top insanity. Did it make a compelling story and plot? Yes, in terms of the whiz-bang shootouts, who's around the corner hunting court gentry. But in terms of a plot of like deep significance and geopolitical backdrop, it didn't have any of that, I felt. Where this one gets a lot of that, right? So you're taking that over-the-top action, but you're not forcing it to be these random hit squads who I don't believe would actually be doing what they're doing to go after this guy just for money and this big pot of gold. Instead, they're motivated by international forces. The Russians have an agenda. We learn 3/4 through the book the Chinese have an agenda. The CIA has an agenda. Like, there's all these players going on in a real-world conflict, which when this book came out, did you say 2010?
Yeah.
We're at the height of the Darfur conflict and genocide and the publicity surrounding it. So it's so much more grounded in that it's a real-world event. Mark Greaney went all in on the location. And if we want to talk setting, I don't think you could paint a better picture of the towns along the Red Sea coast, the middle of the desert, the airports. I just felt transported to Northeast Africa and Sudan. I thought it was phenomenal setting. And so it makes the book seem more realistic than this fantastic castle, right? And they're all coming at the Gray Man left, right, and center. And it just was, like you said, more grounded. And the geopolitics, I thought, was perfect. And had twists and turns. Twists and turns you would believe about who's doing what for what motives. I like that the enemy, as much as it is the Sudanese president, it's not really. It's your own government sending, Zach Hightower after you. Zach Hightower, I really want to get into him. He's almost the perfect foil for the Gray Man. What a complex character.
Very interesting character. Like, I wanted to like him, and then like the end scene in the boat
He
and
won't
the
give up.
sub is like, are there people that like that really exist?
He's
I
Captain
I don't
America.
think so.
He's
I don't think
captain.
so. He
He he's
exactly.
captain, just taking orders.
I don't think there are people like that truly exist.
If Court Gentry is the gray man, this guy is like the red, white, and blue man. Like, just take the orders, and he has
So much
no
so that
other.
he even said, "Wow, this was a roundabout way of getting to my objective. Essentially sacrificing myself so that way you die, which is my objective." Like what?
He won't stop
In a
at anything.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
Their
But
relationship is so fucked up. And what's intriguing, I love this move by Greaney. We don't really know their history. It's kind of
no,
hinted at. And I
because
asked our
remind me,
patrons.
he wasn't mentioned in the last book, right?
No. So that's what I had to ask the patrons, because, Chris and Mark are two of our followers, huge Gray Man fans. I wanted to ask them, like, am I supposed to know this Zach Hightower from book one? It kind of drops us in the middle of their relationship, and it hints at a Kiev operation that the Gray Man was in. It hints at how there was a shoot on sight order because he went after the team, and I think it sounded like he ended up killing some of his Gulf Sierra guys and his fellow men on Zach Hightower's team, but he was manipulated, and it seems like something super shady went, like the Bourne movie. The first
Right.
Bourne movie where he's
Yeah,
trying to figure out what he did and he has no memory of it?
He has no idea what he did. Yeah.
Something went on with the Gray Man that we haven't been told yet, and it kind of wets your whistle. So I think the Zach Hightower stuff was really interesting. One, because of how his character is written, but two, because there's so many missing gaps, and I have to go finish the series now, and I got to know which book they tell that story in.
Yeah, and then I guess what else is confusing me is that when you watch the movie at the very beginning, he's there to like do a hit, and he stumbles into Sierra 4.
Right.
I was like thinking, oh, like, does that have any connection with this book? But no, it's just like they just threw it in there. But yeah, I felt like he had built enough of the backstory that I'm intrigued by it. Like you said,
exactly.
like I really want to know what happened. It's this running through line of, was that you in Kiev, man? Like, and he just constantly says no comment. Like, I want to know what happened in Kiev. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then to the very end, right? Court is constantly trying to get information out of people to understand why he was put through what he was put through last book, right? Why the shoot on sight was ordered. And I guess I'm assuming that someone put it out there because they wanted Court gone, but I guess we don't know. And that hopefully that'll be something that, and this was something that our patrons were saying, is that Mark has he's pivoted throughout this entire series. So I don't know what book he's on, but it's been like 7 book runs where he'll do like a storyline, like an overarching storyline, and then pivot to something new, which I'm kind of excited about.
That's probably filling in the gaps like the Kiev operation, or what he and Zach Hightower's relationship was like, and maybe his recruitment by him into the team. I think the series as a whole is like a sandbox that's very different from some others where it's so linear, you just keep telling the story. But here in book 2, he's already saying, this series, if you are with me long term, is going to be different. He's dropping so many hints to go back in time, to go forward in time. And then I'm pretty sure he also plays around with first-person perspective, because I don't know about you, but it was refreshing, especially after a lot of Brad Thor we've been doing, and going back to Mitch Rapp as well, the competing storylines and the jumping around. It was refreshing to have one narrative. Like, we're on the ground with the Gray Man. I felt like this book could have been first person. You could have told it from his eyes as he's learning what the Russians are plotting, and Sid actually had a different agenda, how the CIA wants him to go undercover. So he's like double undercover. But then when we shoot the Chinese, the game plan changes, and Denny Carmichael goes off on him saying mission parameters are different. We can't have our hands on this. We can't turn in the president, kill him. he refuses to do it. You know how Zach feels about taking orders. That's going to put the Gray Man and Zach on a collision course. So I felt like watching him adapt to all of this incoming intel, or as things changed on the ground. Like the best action sequence was everything in the Sudan once he has the president. Like,
oh yeah,
that was just phenomenal. Yet
it was like a nonstop ride.
It was nonstop. Yet it changed. The stakes changed when the Chinese chopper went down, and he was given different orders. And now the whole cluster and the whole geopolitical fallout needs to be maneuvered. He's not willing to do that. He's going to do what was right, because the only reason we know the Gray Man gets into these missions in the first place is to do what's right. He sees a greater good. And if that changes and someone pulls the rug out from under him, they're toast. Like,
right.
It was fun to watch him go through that. And I think even first person would have been cool to be inside his head.
Yeah, because there's only like a few scenes where we're not like with the Gray Man. And those are the scenes, like you said, when we're undergoing the mission and we're cutting back and forth between, you know, obviously Sierra 6's mission and, you know, the rest of the Whiskey Sierra
team. Yeah.
And so, you know, obviously he knows about it because he's listening into the headset that he's tuned into, but we're getting a little bit more. So yeah, this book you could have done like only first person, so not knowing what else was going on, and like kind of cut in with like radio transmissions or stuff like that. That would have been really cool.
But wasn't it nice to not have 3 other random storylines going on at the same time that confuse us? Like, if we cut away,
it was one storyline.
Yeah, if we cut away from Sierra Team and we went to like Ellen Walsh every like 5 chapters doing X, Y, and Z with the ICC, or if we cut away, we go to Sid, and Sid is talking to his Russian contacts,
or we go to Denny Carmichael.
We go to Denny Carmichael.
Fitzroy.
He's blowing a gasket.
Yeah.
Fitzroy. It was just enough that all those people entered the story to interact with the Gray Man. We didn't need to see those people and what they're doing elsewhere. We only needed to hear from them and bring them in when they needed to communicate with Gray Man, or when Gray Man needed them. Like Colin Fitzroy, you know, when he's got nowhere else to turn, especially after book 1. So glad that character was brought back in. Like, that was big. That changes the series moving forward, because I thought after book 1, it was like, this guy's a great character. He's the old man. You know, every book has this old man, but their relationship is so ruined. How are you going to make it so he can come back in later books and be around? This book clearly established, you know, they're back in bed together. They're going to be on the same team. And I wasn't sure if that would be possible after book 1.
Right.
Although Chris, our patron, mentioned they kill him in the movie. What do you do with that?
I know they do. And it's kind of crazy that they did. And the way they portrayed Denny Carmichael as this like conniving, I guess he gave us a little bit of that, but like he just seemed way more like a little bitch in the movie, as opposed to what has been portrayed in the books, and especially portrayed by our wonderful audiobook narrator, Jay Snyder. You know, this Denny Carmichael seems a little bit more, obviously he is manipulating things in the background, but way more in control than what was shown in the movie. You know, I think he was portrayed by the guy from, what was that, like raunchy show on Netflix.
I don't remember the actors at all.
Renee Jean Page. He was in this show that like is back in the. Anyways, never mind.
But he's a serious character. Like, he could pull strings. He's high up in the government. He's connected. You almost want to take orders from that guy. But then when he flies off the handle, I'm kind of like, that guy needs a Zach Hightower, because he's going to follow his orders. He'll be the yes man.
Right.
But what happens when a tour de force like a Denny Carmichael with his connections and his clearance and his high level gives instructions to the Gray Man, like, that the Gray Man don't like? That's what I want to see. And that phone call encapsulated that.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I don't know. Do you want to hit some of these scenes as we talk about the action and suspense?
Yeah, let's talk action suspense because this book is not short of action and suspense at all.
It's kind of like jam packed start to finish. Honestly,
Yeah.
like there's very little time that we're not other than times where Cord is trying to like heal himself or
Mm-hmm.
get some sort of pain medication,
The
get some sort of
narcotics.
respite, the narcotics.
That's another angle to the Gray Man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another dimension.
So we start off with this hit in Dublin. It's pretty cool, pretty interesting. Kind of, giving us the backstory, what has happened post book one, what he's doing now. And it ultimately leads to like why he has to meet up with Sid, because after the hit, the Russians pick him up, take him to Sid, and then that ultimately sets up his entire mission in the Sudan. And so, I guess before we like jump to the Sudan, what did you think of us being in Ireland? That hit, obviously, again, we kind of mentioned, showing that he cares, and that's sort of his inner moral compass, right? That he will look after this kid, because we get that phone call where he's, with his financial guy,
the banker
going to take care
of
this kid. So
yeah, I think the guy's name was Slattery. He goes after, and it was such a different tone.
McDougal or something like that. Slattery
McDougal. Yeah,
very like fake Irish name.
Yeah, exactly. But he goes into that Irish pub, which was believable, which was actually the gang's hideout, and he's on their turf now. And I think the book starts with a very different tone than we get with the Sudan stuff. And part of me was jarred by this tonal shift, because the Ireland stuff is, I feel, dark. It's gritty.
Oh, very dark.
We're in the dingy pub. He's waiting for the Guinness, right? He tries to show that he's an insider when he, pours the Guinness the right way, or waits for the Guinness to settle the right way. This is not a dead giveaway. He's an outsider. But that gets the gang's interest of like, who's this guy over here? And eventually, he encounters Slattery, who he's supposed to kill for Sid. So I think you're right. It establishes that depth of he's not just going to kill for no reason. It establishes early he's going after this Slattery guy because he's an assassin. He's killed some bad dudes, bad hombre. But he's also willing to hear him out. And I was wondering if this was a mistake. He seems to let his guard down too soon, because the guy tells him, Sid's not who you think he is. Sid says, some other people hired me because I've got skeletons in my closet. Sid just wants to get rid of me. You're just doing Sid's dirty work. Like, you're just his hand. I'm a washed up, overweight assassin now playing in a band. Sid has no use for me anymore, so he sent you. And the Gray Man's like, that's not true. He sent me because we're doing the right thing by taking you off the board. He's like, you're taking me off the board because I'm washed up. And Sid kind of lied to him and sold him on the contract for the wrong reasons. And the Gray Man lets his guard down, starts drinking with the dude, and the dude flips the table on him, almost gets the upper hand. But the Gray Man, so is it a weakness that he was willing to hear this guy out? He believed him, and he believed his sob story. Let me set up a trust for my son. Let me move money in the right places. Are you going to really screw over my son since I'm the only caretaker for him? He's got this disease. And Gray Man's like, he didn't buy it at first. He's like, screw you, I don't care. But he heard the guy out and eventually promised, I'll watch out for your son. And the guy, as he's dying, says, like, you are one of the good ones, Gray Man. Like, you are a human. I think that meant a lot to the Gray Man. So it was really just character building, I think, and setup for the most part.
Yeah. But how many times is his morality going to be the thing that gets him in trouble?
Yeah.
Because
the woman,
it starts with this Slattery character, him letting down the guard, ultimately leads to, more of a fight than what he would have had. The entire scene with the International Criminal Court lady, I'm forgetting her name, but
Anna Walsh or Ellen Walsh? I think it's definitely Walsh.
Ellen Walsh. Yeah, you're right. Ellen Walsh.
Well, let's talk about that scene once they land. What do you think once they land in Sudan and he's with the Russians, but this lady is like kind of keeping her eye on them?
I don't know. It was kind of awkward. Like that whole scene was a little bit awkward to me. But then once she like got in and like, all right, I was just kind of confused that this person would be going rogue from the ICC on her own in like this war-torn country trying to prove something.
She admits that.
Maybe she does admit that, like, it's
she
kind of
admits the
crazy.
naivete.
Yeah. But the fact that she would like have this hand-drawn sketch of a airplane, I don't know. I'm just thinking like 2010, like when she just had a picture of it. I don't know.
It almost lost me on buyability when obviously it's like this white woman in Sudan and he's like this Russian dude, and it's like he's gonna have to protect her because we just set him up as, you know, the moral hero. So we're like, okay, obviously he's gonna have to protect her when she gets herself into the shit. And when they're taking her to the prison, that's an underrated action scene or suspense scene, because the later Sudan stuff, once they got the president, is so good. And once he's with,
you're talking
Sierra
about like
team,
when he steals, not steals,
trucks,
but pays for the rickshaw.
Convoy, the rickshaw, and then the convoy with the other aide guy, Bianchi, the Italian.
Like post. Yeah, no, there's two really good scenes with Ellen. There's the scene of getting, you know, stopping her from going into the prison. Right?
Yeah, that's the
where
rickshaw.
He gets the rickshaw.
Yeah,
douses himself in water. Has the gas. You know, he literally. It's like MacGyver mixed with, Ethan Hunt mixed with James Bond.
It's true.
Comes up with these crazy ideas.
Yeah,
gets a gas in a pail to be able to get her out of her situation. Yeah, and then following that up with they drive just out in the middle of nowhere.
The desert. Yeah,
get
good conversation there.
Yeah,
the two of them,
like, you know, overnight. Obviously all of that timing is just character building, us trying to figure out, you know, a little bit more about who he is. And I don't know if this Ellen Walsh character is going to be. It seemed like he was kind of having this budding relationship with her, and obviously at the very end we get this very, you got to run, Court, you got to run.
Yeah.
And you know, he obviously chooses not to go back and see her, but will she come back again? I'm intrigued to see if, like, you know, he will be her, you know, not to throw another a Mission Impossible reference, but like, you know, his wife, I'm forgetting her name, but she's played by famous actress. You know, he is constantly like watching her from afar, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm in two places with her. Would I have wanted them to actually been able to sit down, have that date and talk? Sure, it would have been nice. Is it realistic? No, because he wouldn't have walked into that situation. You know, who knows what game she's playing, any teams watching them. So I'm like, okay, would it be nice if they get to meet up in another book and their story continues, and even if it becomes romantic? Sure, great. If she dies and we never hear from her again, or she's just completely gone and written off, sure, I'm also okay with that. Or if she comes back once, they try to reconnect in a book, something goes wrong, doesn't happen, she's never mentioned again. It's almost like she's an okay character where if you keep her, great. If you kill her, great. If you never hear from her again, also great. Like, I don't really care beyond this.
Yeah, no, I agree. But there was some cool scenes with her in Sudan.
You mentioned MacGyver. The convoy. Dude.
Oh, yeah, the convoy scene, like where he first tries to improvise this bomb with like a Zippo that with a clock where it's going to like turn, you know, it's kind of crazy.
Humanitarian aid. He's using trucks of humanitarian aid to make a bomb to blow up a convoy.
And he's for sure like that is going to work. But then just as a backup, he like jerry rigs this rocket using a canister of some sort of gas, right?
Yeah.
And he knows that's going to work. And of course, the first bomb, you know, it doesn't work right away.
Fizzles out,
but then his backup works, and then all hell breaks loose.
Perfect timing. Yeah. I guess that's right. Also, as they're basically being captured by the Janjaweed, I thought that was that was the first time you really felt the Darfur crisis front and center. Like the Russians landing and selling weapons and arms, sure, whatever. But once they're in the desert and, you know, the riders on horseback come up, and what is Janjaweed? They even say means something like death on horseback or something. And when those guys ride up and start taking them, I'm like, oh shit, that's quite a suspenseful scene. And then his jerry-rigged rocket goes off at just the right moment, and they get out of there. a while. And then to have this NGO character or humanitarian aid dealer, but he's actually taking money from, he's bribing basically all the warlords, and he's world renowned. He's going to these galas, he's getting awards. He was kind of an interesting character because I bet that's how the game's played. So many people getting these accolades.
He's like the person who actually gets shit done, and that's the only way you can get shit done.
Right.
And then it was kind of like gruesome how he had his final moment getting, lassoed with a noose and then dragged away with a freaking horse. Like that was intense. There's some like gnarly ass kills in this book.
Yeah. It's kind of like what he deserved though, because he was funding and fueling all these warlords around the world and acting like a hero for it. But
yeah, he's kind of a scumbag if you think about it, right?
It kind of makes me think of like Lord of War.
He sets up all these humanitarian aid functions and builds these things. But the only reason he's able to do that is because he's paying these guys off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
he's buying influence to keep himself safe. Yeah. It's a double-edged sword. It's how the sausage is made. Yeah. It's like, what do we do to get aid to people who need it? Do you have to make a deal with the devil? I thought he was an interesting little side, C-level character.
I love that quote by Fitzroy. No one wants to see how the sausage was made, but everyone wants to eat it.
Everyone wants to eat it. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. All right, where are we next? How do they get out of that scene with the convoy?
They just ride away on camelback, right? Or not Camels, horseback. They take horses
through the sandstorm, right.
And then they go through this crazy ass sandstorm. I thought that was going to play a bigger role, but
this
no,
book
it's
is nonstop,
just a sandstorm. I know it is. It's just, and then literally they just go their separate ways. And she's like, I didn't get the whole thing. Like, you're an international war criminal. Like, I am going to indict you. Like,
yeah, she wanted to prosecute him.
That kind of
stuff. She couldn't get over
the
fact that he shot these two guys in cold blood and left them to die. When she's like, we could have saved him. He's like, we couldn't have saved him. They were dying. He's the realist.
I did them a justice by not letting them suffer because they were going to die.
Yeah.
That was his argument, right?
Or yeah, he's the pragmatist and she's the idealist, like in this cloud world. And he's like, this is real life, lady. So yeah, he's the pragmatist. I think that could lead to a very good relationship between the two because she comes around a little. He softens a little for her. She softens a little and says like, fine, I won't indict you. I see why you had to do what you had to do. Let's help each other out. She obviously comes back later. She likes the idea of turning over the president, Abood, so she's willing to help with that. I think they're a good foil for each other as they're softening each other a little. So,
yeah, but then after that, we completely pivot to, him working with the Sierra team or the whiskey. What is it? Whiskey Sierra.
Whiskey Sierra. Yep. Formerly
to
Gulf
get the president.
Sierra. Yeah.
Formerly Gulf Sierra.
What do you think about taking the president and there was like a marketplace in the town and he has to go one way, but then the whiskey team is running a distraction. Oh, and the Sudanese never show. They were supposed to have that diversion created. There's a lot of last minute changes on this op that kind of don't sit the right way with you, but they got to do it anyway. A lot of those situational calls of we're moving forward either way, even if it's not ideal scenario.
Yeah, like my antennae are up when, the entire rest of the team knows that there's this plan B, but Court was not read in on this plan B. Like,
exactly.
Well, something's up there, obviously. But then in the end, I guess, Sierra 1 through 5, they're not like trying to backstab Court. They don't want to read him in because I guess they think he won't play along if they told him that no matter what we're doing this. I just didn't understand why you wouldn't tell Court there's a plan B.
But then you need him. You call him in when your ass is hunkered down. And there's that other scene with, was it Sierra 2 who was captured or was it 5? And they like have him and somebody's got to take the shot. And Court's like, I'll go in and do it. But Zach ends up being the one to kill his own man. So he doesn't talk.
Yeah,
Was that 2 or 5? I think it was
it's
2.
post, right? Like, so as initially they were going to use this distraction of some Sudanese rebel force,
and they didn't show.
It's supposed to be 100, then it trickles down to 30, and then it trickles down to none.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, the Sierra team themselves is going to cause this distraction, going to force the president to go into the bank and allow for court to capture him. So we'll have this like side by side. It's pretty cool, like action scene, right? Like we're cutting back and forth, but quick scenes with the different Sierra players. They're doing their business, then cutting back to court with the president, him doing his thing.
Yep.
And he pretty much succeeds pretty easily. Like gets out of Dodge, gets him,
Yeah. Minus the arrow.
We come to find, right, minus the arrow in the back of
the back,
which is freaking crazy.
Yeah.
But I guess we come to realize why the president was so willing and why this like episode was so easy, because he ultimately knew this was coming, because he decided to play along with turning himself in, right? Yeah, and then we're kind of with the Sierra team as they get pinned down, as they're stuck in this like quote unquote mall, and then they have the only way to get out is they have to take on this chopper, which in order to do that, one of them has to distract it, gets taken. Yeah, and you're right. He ultimately has the line of sight and has to take him out. But in the meantime, right, Court is able to get the objective, like 20 miles out of town, get him restrained,
tie him up,
and then get called back for help. Like, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. It leads to a couple of interesting calls, because I think at one point Court is high during that. Like he takes the drugs. And
no, that's post all that.
Well, that's after all that. Okay, so I'm also thinking another thing is the arrow, where he has to ask the president to get the arrow out of him.
That's after.
There's a long sequence, dude. It's a very long sequence.
It is. So like he asked the president to get the arrow out of him, and that's before he goes back to like save everybody. But then he saves everybody.
Back. Exactly. And then they go to like a Bedouin tent or something. Like they're hiding out in a Bedouin. Oh, the first hideout is Muhammad's house, who was that cop who Court used, and then he ends up killing. Like I was wondering if he was going to thank this guy for helping him, but Court's like, nope, you're the enemy. Like you work for them. I made you help me, but you didn't do it out of the goodness of your heart. Kills Muhammad.
Right.
And then it's later, right? Isn't that where he gets high in the Bedouin tent because he's looking at the patterns of the fabrics on the roof? Yeah.
He, after like saving the rest of the team, they go off and start to do the exfil, and he has to hide in this tent with the president. And that's when he takes some morphine and starts to trip balls and
tripping balls.
Yeah.
It's right about then that the Chinese intel comes in. That the chopper was Chinese soldiers.
Yeah, and
shortly after that,
the mission has changed, and now we want you to kill the president. And
I was a little lost until the pieces clicked for me, which is if this thing is going to turn into an international global superpower conflict, there can be no evidence that we killed. An American team was authorized to do the mission, and during the mission killed, I think it's like 30-something Chinese operatives who were there clandestinely or secretly training the army or prepping certain factions for this coming civil war with or against the Russians if they take the land. So they were already trying to train the Sudanese, which is why they were around. And then when shit hits the fan, the president's gone, the Chinese are called up to actually not just train, but to act. And if it's Americans caught killing them, that could have been a shitstorm. So Denny Carmichael's like, if we try to turn in the president and we were the ones who kidnapped him and we turn him into the ICC, everyone knows we were in the fight in Port Sudan, and therefore we killed the Chinese operatives. We didn't need that shit. It's like, let the Chinese and the Russians deal with Sudan and clean up their mess and think they can blame each other over this. Once the American footprint was on the ground and Chinese operators were dead, there's no knowing how the CCP responds to that. So I kind of got that call. I bought it.
You bought it? I just
If you
thought like,
kill the president, there's no American footprint on it anymore.
Couldn't you have just like dropped him off in front of the International Criminal Court? Like, you could have just like rolled him up in a bag and like threw him in front of like, somewhere at The Hague, and there you go.
But the whole point was for American diplomacy, I think, to score some points. And if we're not scoring those points, there's no point of turning in Abood anymore.
No point.
We were only turning him in to get brownie points.
I wanted to ask you about this. How do you feel about Court acting as like this geopolitical master in the moment? Like, do you buy that?
I don't think he's the master. I think he's reacting. Like, I think the master would have been somebody who was playing chess and thought ahead. I think instead he's just able to take the facts where they are and truly ask himself, what's the right thing to do? So I think I bought it on that level. The problem is that's a vulnerability because he could have been being played by the Irishman who was trying to tell him what to do. He could be playing by the CIA. He's giving him orders.
He's constantly being played.
Is Abood playing him now? Like when the president is talking to him and he's telling him to shut up, but then he starts listening and then he starts talking. He's like, I know I shouldn't be talking this much with him, but I'm gonna hear him out. Are these mistakes? Is this over and over again his I'm gonna be the good guy? Are they vulnerabilities and are they mistakes that lead to tactical mistakes? I don't know. I think he makes a couple of missteps.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's the point of the Gray Man. I think like he does the same thing in the first book, right?
Yeah, but he wants to do what you said, which was let's just get the president to the ICC. I don't care if the American government wants credit or takes credit or needs to cover up their tracks. None of that matters to me. All that matters now is the right thing, which is putting this guy up for war crimes because of what he did in Darfur, until the president convinces him, if you do that, we start a civil war. The Russians and Chinese still go at it. Sudan is still pulled apart, which shortly after this book is published happens anyway. South Sudan becomes a country. I don't know where Darfur falls in that, being kind of on that western side. I don't know how the genocide exactly played into the ultimate civil war and split where the UN does declare two nations. I don't know so much, but civil war does happen, regardless of if the president gets turned into the ICC or not. Did you buy the oil field stuff? The Chinese wanted the oil rights and the Russians wanted the oil rights. Was that big enough? Was that a big enough catch? I don't know.
Honestly, to me, like it was just like filler.
Yeah. There's a reason to put the Chinese there.
I could take it or leave it, honestly.
Well, the Chinese are doing this across Africa. Like Angola, Namibia, they like buying up cities.
But I feel like when Brad explains the whole Belt and Road Initiative,
it's clear
in the chapter. It's clearer, and or we see it in action, right, in one of his books. I feel like he kind of does this kind of stuff a little bit better, the geopolitical landscape stuff. So
I don't think you can do it better than Brad.
Yeah, it'll be interesting going forward how we classify like what Mark Greaney, what the Gray Man series wants to establish in terms of its villains, like what we're going to do in terms of a geopolitical landscape. Are we going to stay with the Russians? Are we going to go to some sort of Islamic terrorist? So yeah, man. All right, let's transition to action suspense. Scores 10 out of 10.
What do you give it here? Pulling all this together, where do you end up?
I don't know. And by the way, we kind of like hinted at the ending, but I really like the ending of this book.
Yeah.
The whole like mini sub scene,
yeah.
Like you mentioned, he's freaking Captain America, this unrealistic character, willing to sacrifice himself to ultimately get the end goal of killing his target is freaking crazy. It's kind of like nonstop from the very beginning. I think I gotta go 9, right?
Yeah.
and it's good. It's all good and it's necessary. Like
It's all
I think
good.
it's like
Is there one too many things? One too many? Like the way they all got out of sequence for me, does that show that it was a little too much?
I think if you compared it to like an average book, maybe. Mm-hmm. But comparing this to the first book,
sure.
No.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So it's clearly like way trimmed down from the first book. So and setting it the series as to establish like what the series does.
Exactly. 100%. I think when you look at it in light of that, how it compares to the first book, what we're coming off of, it's not too much. And if, like I said earlier, the series wants to establish that now that it's just bombastic, over the top, nonstop, he's indestructible. He's going to go through hell and back every book. He's going to go through hell and back 6 times in one book. Then it's fine with me. So because that's done well, I'm going to go 9.5.
Oh, okay.
And the reason I'm going a little up there is because as we talked, plot dropped just a little.
Okay.
Some of the forced things when we first meet Ellen Walsh on the ground while he's still with the Russians, a little forced to kind of navigate those waters. It does get us to the point where he jumps off the Russian team to go get the guy with the rickshaw, go save her. It eventually checks out. A little awkward. The slattery Irish dude, I liked how it started, but that tonal shift now seems a little off. So like, this book, I'm only going to remember the Sudan stuff. Ireland and even St. Petersburg. He has a whole training sequence getting ready for this mission in St. Petersburg. It all seems a little disjointed. Now that I know this book is about Sudan, the Irish and St. Petersburg stuff kind of falls off a little, the first 10, 15 chapters. So because there's not that complete connection and flow, a couple of those pieces are disjointed. I think 8 for plot.
Okay. That's what I was leaning like 7.5, 8.
Yeah, it could be a 7.5 too. Yeah.
Because I feel like it's a solid plot. There's not too many holes, but there are holes.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's I'm truly am comparing this to last book. Like the last book was both the buy-in score and just the plot itself was like ridiculous and unrealistic.
It was
whereas this
one, yeah.
This one is good, but still we can find some of the we have some nitpicks. So I'm gonna go. I'm 7.5.
7.5. And that's this whole book. It's good. It's really good. Is it great? It's close. But it's just close. Really good. It's just really good.
Yeah, my buy-in score is like, I want to say like a 3.5, 4-ish.
Could go 4.
Like, I believe like everything is pretty believable, other than the fact that if he got shot in the back with an arrow dipped in like poison, or not but like bacteria laden chicken guts, he probably would have been dead.
They're like, we need the antibiotics. We need the antibiotics. They never get the damn antibiotics, and he's doing just fine.
They don't. They mention it. They mention that he smells like a rotting corpse. Yeah, so that's like the gray man aspect to it. So I don't know. I think I'm gonna go 3.5. Like it's good. It's almost a 4.
It's almost a 4. I'm gonna give it that 4. I'm gonna give it the edge because let's factor in the buy-in of as you're reading it. A lot of those sequences, you couldn't put it down. When Ellen's being taken to prison, can't put it down. When he's blowing up the convoy and the Janjaweed guys on the horses are scaring the shit out of him, you can't put it down. When he's taking the president and trying to exfil from Port Sudan, you can't put it down. With the mini sub, we didn't talk about it much, but with Zach Hightower, like, you can't put that down. So I'll give it the 4. I'm buying.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, bad guys. Who's the bad guy of this book?
Who is it? Man, that's tough.
Is it the president?
Yeah.
Is it the Russians? Is it Hightower?
Is it Hightower?
Denny Carmichael?
It kind of is his own team.
I mean, they have this like super weird relationship, right?
Where
in the very beginning, they want to kill this guy, and then they quickly, decide to bring him on his team. So, yeah, exactly. When they first meet, they're beating the shit out of each other. It incapacitates two of them just to then be brought in on their team. But it's, quote unquote, essentially his former team, right?
But we're supposed to be in the dark about that, like the Bourne Identity. It's supposed to be a mystery box.
Right.
Which is kind of cool, a multi-book mystery box. So we're supposed to be missing those pieces.
So if you classify them as like partial bad guys, they're very interesting. The president of Sudan, he's a pretty despicable bad guy.
I'll go down the middle.
Throw in like Sid and the Russians and Carmichael, so kind of the higher ups. Okay. I don't know. It's like a 3.
3. I'm going to go down the middle with a 3. Yeah. It's kind of similar for good guys. Like, Court Gentry's so freaking cool and badass. Like, if we were just rating good guys, his badassery as a protagonist, it's a 5 out of 5. But we got to count. Well, do we have to count Zach? I'm like, do we count Zach as good guy? Do we count Denny?
I know. It was like, do we count Zach in both good guys and bad guys? It's very interesting.
Then do you also count Fitzroy, because he barely comes up in the end? But when you hear Snyder read Fitzroy's voice, and you get that same voice from the Gray Man book, but it took you the whole book to get to hear that old man raspy voice.
You're excited about it. Yeah.
It's exciting. Yeah, with that British flair. Like, it's exciting when you hear that voice. But he's in such a small percentage of the book. So can we count him that heavily on good guys? Is it a 4? Is 4
There's
too generous?
No other...
And the teammates, we don't really get to know the teammates. They don't each have their own individual personalities.
They each have a name.
They have a name, but
we
each have numbers.
Well, we're given their name, and then we're given they're mainly used by numbers. On
purpose, though. Like,
we don't get very much characters. Sorry, we don't get very many characteristics about them.
No.
Other than, like, I think he describes one of them as, he was a, former Delta, or this guy was former reconnaissance Marine, whatever.
I think that's on purpose, though. It's supposed to be a shadow force, not like a Mick Reavers and all his peculiarities, and Charlie Wicker with his little, quips, or Scott Coleman, who has a lot of personality. I think it's supposed to be that way. But it means you don't
like
really
the
know
biggest addition to good guys besides the Gray Man would be this Ellen Walsh character. So what did you think of her? Like, that's probably going to be the biggest deciding factor for the score.
That's like the 3 versus the 4, I feel like, is her. She was so naive, but they have some good conversations.
She kind of pissed me
off.
Car.
She pissed me off at first.
But they have some decent conversations. Yeah, like I felt like her relationship, or like sort of peeling away Court, was very good.
She tried
character building, like it made sense, but at the same time, she really pissed me off, like how she was acting. So,
but she's gonna be freaking out. She's gonna be just going nuts.
Yeah,
and when
true.
He's like, the scorpions, we got to close the windows, and she's like, I'm freaking out. Just talk to me. I need you to just talk. Like, that's how it's gonna go down. I'm going 4. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I like
going 4.
Yeah, I like the book. I want to give it the benefit of the doubt.
All right, I'm going 3.5.
Yeah, it's probably really a 3.5. All right, well, I think something that's very clear. We've been on the fence about a few of these scores. You could go higher, could go lower. It's not so great. Setting is a 5. I can't see a way that you don't put a 5 as the setting, but you tell me.
I don't know. I think, not that I've ever been to Sudan, but I used to mentor a Sudanese national in grad school, and what she would describe of her land, he got it perfectly, like from what I've read, what I've heard, and then even just jumping around from Ireland to St. Petersburg, and spending a bulk of the time in Russia, or in Sudan, and like the different aspects of Sudan, looking up, you're a geography teacher, like you have the desert, you have like the mainland, you have this like swampy, the coast, you have this, where the mangroves are, like, and we got all of those in this book with pretty decent descriptions. Mark does a great job on the setting in this novel, so it's clearly a 5.
Yeah, it almost feels like one giant set action piece on the Red Sea coast. What was that? And there was also like a suburb just outside of Port Sudan where they captured the president, or where he like vacationed. Like I felt like that was a little more ritzy, a little more upscale. And then they go to the neighborhood with this loose mall, which is really just a marketplace. And I feel like you could feel the texture of the buildings and the ground, and you know where the sea is, to your east. And when they have to make moves of like one team goes east, one team goes south, one team goes north, you could almost track the whole thing. And then, not to mention, one other really interesting setting, when Zach takes the shot, when he knocks out the president, and he calls court. We didn't even talk about that. He calls court gentry and says, "It's your lucky day. I only have enough time to make one shot." And court's like, "No." And then boom, the president goes down. That was the moment, I think, when I knew Zach Hightower was a zealot, was an absolute zealot, when he took that shot and said, "Court, I didn't have enough time to take one for you, but I will hunt you forever. This won't end." Like, damn.
And that scene was intense.
And that was also a cool setting, right? Because there were like these hills to the west. You were backed up by the sea, but then there was a dune, which you can get for cover. Are really cool. And yes, that was
as you're reading, you just assume that they had all left and are like...
He was gone. He exfilled,
doing their thing. But we should have known better that he was... he immediately started his next mission and was, he's gonna execute that president, and also make sure that court was his next target. So.
Those were his orders. Captain isn't going to stop. Cover talk. Or do you want to do free space? You want to do our free space?
Sure. Let's do our free space. Free 5 points. For me, kind of wanted to highlight, I don't remember his name, but he was one of the aid workers working with Mario. And he ended up helping out the Gray Man. And I just feel like Mark put him in there, and he ends up, sacrificing his life for, to try to save people. I feel like besides this Mario Batali guy, not Mario Batali, but this Italian guy, putting in a character that truly is of the people, trying to help his people, that to me was that character, and he had told the Gray Man his story. His family had been brutally affected by all of this, and the fact that he's still out here, putting his life on the line, ultimately does put his life on the line to help people, was just, that's the kind of character that you put in your book that makes you know that you understand the situation. So that's what I'm going to give my free space to.
That's a great call, because those are powerful characters. And when an author finds somebody like that and puts them at the right place in the right time, they're in that convoy, and the Gray Man and him are just kind of chatting and hitting it off, and it's giving that personal context to why you do what you do, why he's helping this humanitarian aid organization, even at the risk of his life. And ultimately, I'm pretty sure in the shootout and the Janjaweed and everything, once the rocket goes off in the trucks, he saves the day, and he gives his life saving was it the Gray Man or Walsh? He saves one or both of them in the moment, just at the right time. So good shout. I'm going to say it's just all the things that establish this series. After book 1, I wasn't sure, will I like the Gray Man and how it's so unbelievable he's indestructible? Well, now I kind of do, because it's clearly the trope we're going for. Same with Laszlo. There's the scene in the Gray Man with Laszlo, and I think it was Prague, somewhere in Eastern Europe, and he's in that trap trying to get the fake passports and documents, and he puts them in the trap. He has to use bullets to fashion. He makes an explosion. He hides under the mattress, and it blows the top off. he MacGyvered it. And the fact that happens again, when that happened in the desert with the rocket that goes off in the aid truck, you take crates of humanitarian aid, like you said, clocks and shit, and turns it into this incendiary device and ultimately a rocket. I'm here for that. Like, once that happened, it was such a direct callback for me to the scene with Laszlo in the first book that I now know this series has a voice. So I'm going to shout out Mark Greaney for all these times he, in just 2 books, gave this series that difference maker, that edge. And I think it's him MacGyvering. I think it's him being indestructible. And I think it's him being a loyal person doing the right thing for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Very
for
clear.
Sure, man.
Very clear.
Very clear. All right, cover, dude. We got to do the covers.
Well, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on.
We weren't that high on the Gray Man covers.
Mm.
We gave them a 4. Or not 4. We gave them a 2.
And we gave the buy-in a 1, just to remind people.
Oh. Well, yeah, we did give the buy-in a 1. Here, cover A, has a mosque, has a plane bombing. I guess it's...
What's with the plane?
A helicopter.
Yeah, what's with the plane on fire?
Helicopter. The second, I guess the whole thing is supposed to be about an assassination attempt. Like, that's why he goes up there. He's going to shoot the president as a sniper.
Is it cover B?
And then the rest of them are kind of just this, like, hooded figure running. Not hooded, but a trench coat or coat wearing figure running in some sort of city.
Why
we get things that, like, it's G is a snowy Capitol building.
Why? Chris,
I see.
Why do all these have what looks like a European city? I'm guessing St. Petersburg in almost all of these. B, C, F, G. Why? Chris, they read the first, 2 chapters, or maybe Dublin. They read, the first 2 chapters, and, or even they didn't. They just pick a random guy running.
G is the United States Capitol building.
What? Oh, my God, it is. No.
J is the Washington
Are you sure? What's
Monument.
This walkway? How is that the Capitol?
I'm just seeing the dome. I'm assuming that's the Capitol, but maybe it's some other city.
That dome looks weird.
Yeah, you're right.
Either way, it's stupid. If it was DC, it's even more stupid. But there's one rule for this book: the cover has to be Sudan. No question. That's it.
It's got to be the desert.
It has to be the desert. It has to evoke, even if it's a city, it has to evoke Port Sudan. It has to evoke the coast. It can't be a European-looking city. It just can't, and that's a massive fail.
Honestly,
massive fail.
My favorite looking covers are like some of these crazy ass
international
European ones. International ones.
They're insane.
Like the very last one. Oh, we get like this dusty convoy with dirt and grime, and I'm just thinking, I'm getting the vibes of that convoy with what we were just talking about with the aid workers. Even M.
Yep.
With the explosion on the water, and there's a helicopter. Like, I mean, yeah, the helicopter wasn't involved when he was on the water, but at least all those parts are involved.
With minarets in the background, so it's clear that this water is the Red Sea.
Right. Exactly.
But dude, talk to me about K.
And then
with the dunes.
And then K is awesome. Like in the desert, like that's every one of these covers should be like a desert one or like something.
If you take the convoy in O, combine it with the desert of K, and you have a little nod to something in
to the
M,
helicopter.
Yeah, the helicopter. If you can mash that up, you would have had a perfect cover. And instead,
ultimate cover.
It would have been ultimate. Like the desert and dunes there in K are great. But you look at J, the Washington Monument with freaking the Terminator in a suit. We got a little babyface Arnold Schwarzenegger in front of the Washington Monument. What the hell? Look, what? Just for that, I want to give it a 0. But again, that's a foreign. It looks like a German cover. They do crazy shit. So, I'm so torn on this because the mainstream ones, like you said, A, B, C, D, have nothing to do.
D is that looks kind of like
D. He's just
is he on
floating.
top of like some roof?
He's levitating, dude. Like that could be a desert, but we can't see. So that one could be the right environment. Yeah. At least the sky has those sandy colored, like orange, yellow tones.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But the motherfucker's at just levitating.
F definitely has him at the very bottom, like in, that kind of looks like Dublin, but at least the top looks like an Arab city.
Oh, really? I was going to say Russian. That's St. Petersburg. Does it not look Russian?
Yeah, I don't know. These covers are weak, but then some of the international ones like make up for it. So I don't know, 2, 1.5. What are you gonna give it?
God, dude, I was generous in other areas, so it's so unfortunate. And just another thing, I believe the original book had this face. Look at cover A. I think it had that face in like the shadows looking away, and I don't like it. They have standing man, they have running man, they have face problems, all things, if you've listened to this pod long enough, you know we don't like and I don't like. Combine that with getting the cities wrong for the most part and the general feel wrong, and not a single one of these, I think, being aesthetically pleasing. And I think the main ones I've seen printed in the US market is, I believe, A, B, and E. I feel like E came out as like a newer kind of redesign. Yet it's very, very poorly designed from an aesthetic viewpoint. I think because all that, I got to go 1. There's a couple of things I like on the international, but I can't take the random, I don't know, fucking Filipino or Hungarian cover and give it a high score because of that. Like, I can't. It's so minuscule. No one has that cover. It's barely printed.
Yeah, true.
So I can't give it points for that. It's got to be a 1.
All right. Interesting. All right. So in the end, I gave it a 38.5 and you gave it a 39.5.
Okay.
We each gave The Gray Man a 38. So not that much higher than what we rated The Gray Man.
This book is much better, though.
Yeah, I guess we rated The Bad Guys and The Gray Man way higher.
Let's put it this way. If you take cover out of the equation, this book is a 42, 43. Like, for me at least, the cover just tanked
it. is really bringing it down.
If this book had a good cover, it's very easily in the 40s. Easily. And I think that's more accurate, more representative of the story.
Should we have given more for Good Guys for Court?
I gave a 4. I think that's where I'm going to settle, and a big chunk of that is Court Gentry. Big chunk of it, not the surrounding cast of characters.
I think I'm going to change mine to a 4.
I think you should be a 4
to a 39
and come up to a 39. I agree. Could we have made up ground anywhere else? I don't think so.
Yeah, so I was trying to. So we gave action in the. I would say the action. There was more action in The Gray Man than there was this one. So
you think so? Could we have gone 10?
Good. We went double 10s for The Gray Man.
Did we really? Wow.
I think I should have gone higher on plot.
You know what sucks is I think we talked ourselves down on the plot throughout the episode, where if you asked me about plot when I closed the book, I've been like 9 easy.
9. Yeah.
But we talked ourselves down just in the the conversation, which I think is fine because we found loopholes that here's another thing I'm thinking about The Gray Man when it comes to it. It's not a thinking book. It's not a thinking series. It's going to present the story. It's going to take you on an adventure ride. It's like the Gray Man movie. It wasn't cerebral. It wasn't a thinking movie. I think it got relatively low scores because it had no depth. It was just fun. And I even had to say that when we talked to, if you didn't hear our conversation with the movie reviewers, the comm majors, they hated it. If you think of it as just an action flick that's supposed to be smart and engaging and gripping, It's really not. It's just a fun ride. It's like a roller coaster. Strap yourself in. This is going to be some crazy dope shit. Get ready. And for that, it's phenomenal. But when you want a story that activates your brain, that gets you thinking, this is not that at all. This is just a roller coaster. Strap up. So,
yeah.
It's for some people, it's not for others. I think Mitch Rapp and Vince Flynn, when you add the political stuff, has a little more of that intrigue, a little more of that spy.
That's what I like.
The spy game aspect, and the Gray Man has no spy game. It has shoot 'em up and go bananas. So it's not exactly my cup of tea, but I am curious to read some more.
Yeah, same. At least we'll read the next couple.
The next couple, and who knows, once the Scott Harvath podcast is done and dusted in a few months here, we need a third series to get to. So we'll see if this is in the running for, I don't know, it sounds like a lot of books to commit to, but I definitely want a few more before we decide that.
Yeah. All right, what are we covering next time, Mike, when we get on this pod?
I think it's Brad Thor time.
We're gonna crank out the rest of Brad Thor. I think we have 5 books left plus a short story. We're gonna commit to finishing that for the rest of the year into the new year, and let's do it.
And we'll retool what you'll hear on this feed. So go subscribe to the Mitch Rapp pod, the Scott Harvath pod, and we'll retool in 2025 in the new year what content you'll be hearing here on the Thriller podcast. Definitely a couple of Gray Man books, but we'll throw in a couple other gems as well.
Yeah. All right, we need to thank our patrons. Our Deputy Director, Sherry F., our Special Operator, Jason C., our Special Agents, Ben, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Don, Peggy, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review to all 3 seasons of No Limits using Apple Podcast and Spotify. You can find us online at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Insta at Thriller Podcast. And as always, just like court, be court.
And of course, we can't sign off without a limerick.
Oh, yeah, we almost forgot.
So we were a little tough on this book, but I like my limerick. It really talks about some of the things I really enjoyed. So, there once was a war in Sudan, and the Russians had a grand plan. But Sierra 6 has a couple of tricks. Oh, how wide this scheme does span. There's a lot of scheming.
Oh, couple of tricks. I like that. Trick
tricks.
Or treat.
That's Court.
Coming up for Halloween, so
Court's got the tricks.
that was good.